2005. It was New Year's Eve, the final day of 2004, when a group of teenagers made their way down into the catacombs to begin their celebration. This wasn't super uncommon at the time, as many of the entrances to this labyrinth were very easily accessible. This one in particular just so happened to be located directly next to the public school, School 56, and had just been left wide open, making it the perfect place for friends to sneak a few drinks. As the group began to grow more intoxicated, one of the girls wandered off in search of a place to relieve herself. However, she apparently took one too many turns and soon found herself completely alone. She cried out, but the tunnels were just too complicated. Each step she took led her more and more into obscurity. Her friends tried to find her, or maybe they didn't, we really don't know, but in their drunken state, they left the tunnels without their friend, and never went back to find her. If she did have a flashlight, it wouldn't have lasted long, and for days she likely wandered deliriously through that pitch-black maze, until after what was likely at least 3 awful days, she passed away, with her body being found approximately 3 miles away from the nearest exit. And looking at one of the only attempted maps of this tunnel system, she never stood a chance. Perhaps it was dehydration or hypothermia that killed her, but according to some, based on the photo, the corpse appears to have its skull caved in, implying that in a desperate attempt to end her anguish, she may have bashed her head against the wall until she passed away. Her name was Masha, and she was only 19 years old. 3 long months later, in April of 2005, Lata and his group would stumble across the body, immediately reporting their findings to the police, though law enforcement refused to even try and venture down there in order to retrieve her, as they knew just how dangerous and unmapped this environment was. It would take 2 long years for her body to be recovered, thanks to a friend of Lata writing a strongly worded letter to the government that included a photo of Masha's body. The story is unimaginable. To be trapped in a place like this with no means of escaping, it has to be the absolute worst way to go. And because of the gruesome nature of this story and the photograph, it spread all throughout the online world, where it became a legendary internet mystery, as even with the added context, many were still left with pressing questions. Were Masha's friends involved in some way with her death? Had they abandoned her there on purpose? And did Lata know more than he claimed? But as it turns out, there was one far more pressing question that needed to be answered. In 2015, a full decade after this photo was taken, a journalist named Mike Pearl had picked up the case with the hopes of writing a Halloween article for Vice, and in his research he made a rather unusual discovery, as according to him, Masha seemingly didn't exist. Pearl was never able to find any verifiable proof that a girl named Masha had ever gone missing in that area. He was also not able to find any death records of anyone by that name either, or even any reports of a body being pulled from the catacombs during this time frame. Something just wasn't adding up, and it got stranger from here. Sometime after the photograph began making its rounds, one of the most prominent explorers of the Odessa catacombs put out a statement on his own website in regards to Masha, which read, "Besides the original photographer, there isn't one person, civilian or law enforcement, that can confirm the story. We believe it is just a practical joke and the corpse is fake." Following this revelation, Pearl was able to track down Lata, who was unable to recount where the body was roughly seen, or even how to get in touch with the other people shown in this photo, none of whom had ever come forward to back his testimony, which makes the credibility of Lata and his story of Masha incredibly shaky at best. However, this is where the crux of the mystery stands today. When looking at these photos, one thing is apparent to me and essentially everyone else who has seen them. The corpse shown seems very real, and matches the decay of the bodies found in similar environments, with that one prominent Odessa explorer eventually deleting his statement at some point over the years, leaving the general consensus that this is in fact a real corpse. But if the story of Masha isn't true, then who is this? Well, we have no idea. It's entirely a mystery. But the reality of the situation is that bodies being found down in these catacombs isn't totally uncommon. Over the years, many explorers have gotten lost down there and suffered the exact same fate as the story of Masha. But on top of this, these tunnels have also been used by murderers as a dumping ground for their victims' bodies, with either one of these scenarios being possible in this case. though the frustrating part is that we may never actually know who this person was or how they died, as I and many others have doubts that this body was ever actually recovered, just simply due to lack of public information and news reports about it. And instead, the reality is that this corpse is probably still down there somewhere and has simply been lost to time, as sections of the catacombs have been known to flood and cave in, sealing them off from the outside world forever. So for now, and potentially the rest of time, the story of Masha will remain an internet mystery. It's September 1985. A hunter trudges through the wooded terrain of Christie Creek, Montana, on the trail of something big. He had been hunting a large black bear and managed to land a single shot, causing the animal to take off, leaving behind a trail of blood. He followed this trail all throughout the remote region before stumbling across a shallow ditch, where he would find a body. Though not the body of the bear he had just shot, and rather, the body of a woman, reduced to bone. The remains were quickly sent off for forensic analysis, though very little could be determined other than the fact that she was a young woman, and that she had been murdered, as they found 2 bullet holes in her skull. With there being essentially no other information to go off of, a special team at the FBI started creating a composite of what this woman may have looked like. This was the result. This was their first attempt at depicting this Jane Doe, who they would later dub Christie Crystal Creek, though it wouldn't be their last. The uncanniness of these depictions is undeniable, and recently I've fallen down this rabbit hole of disturbing police sketches and recreations. As though these can often be very helpful and do lead to legitimately good results, there are often times where they appear almost non-human, with many examples like Christie's being shared online on the FBI's website in order to enlist the public's help in identifying these victims, with one of the more notorious examples coming decades later, in 2014. The discovery was made on June 5th of that year, when a group of highway workers were mowing grass in the town of Geneva, Wisconsin, when they noticed a pair of strange-smelling suitcases. Inside them were 2 bodies belonging to 2 women, both in various stages of decomposition, and both appearing to have been strangled to death. One would quickly be identified as 37-year-old Laura Simonson, while the other was in much worse shape, and distinguishing her facial features proved extremely difficult. But this didn't stop them from trying. This is one of the more infamous examples out there due to just how unnatural it appears, with the face of this woman being turned into a meme and even being used in a video game. But to me, there's one example that I've never been able to shake, as the entire story and its recreation gives me such an uneasy feeling. The discovery was made all the way back in April of 1977, when a couple in Alberta, Canada had returned to their often abandoned cabin in order to empty the septic tank, only to find a body floating inside. The body was in brutal shape and showed signs of extreme torture, as the man had been beaten, mutilated, burned with cigarettes, and even shot multiple times. And due to the condition of the body, it was impossible to identify him, though regardless, a recreation was made, and using a computer model of the man's skull, they slowly pieced him together. He would later be dubbed Septic Tank Sam. There's something so depressing about these composites, as these are real people with real stories and real names, that have been reduced to these horrifying images and tacky nicknames. But there's another side of these police sketches too, as when dealing with victims, it's obvious